Thank you, Kiona. Appreciate that. And hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, Behind the Scenes with Strategic Planning. It is the first webinar of a two-part series that we've put together regarding strategic planning. And we look forward to presenting both of them to you here, one today and the next one in October. I'm really glad to see folks signing up on the right side of our Adobe Connect page. Please continue to do so as I'm chatting and getting started with our webinar today. It's a great way for you all to get names, networks, state locations, that kind of thing, started to be connected. One of our goals as your TA provider is to build relationships between all of us, you with us and you all with each other. So please continue to sign in. And make note, this list won't be up the whole time of our webinar, but it will be available in the recording, and also you guys can take some notes as folks are signing in. Just a couple of Adobe things that I like to encourage when with your already muted phones, *2 to unmute. Sometimes what I do is I *2 to unmute and then mute myself on my phone. The important thing is that we don't have an echo, which we've struggled with in the past a little bit. So if you're unsure about that, just keep your phone muted, and then when you're ready to talk, *2 to unmute. And then likewise, if you're hesitant to jump in but you have a question or you have a comment to share, you can feel free to use the hand-raising emoticon at the top of your Adobe Connect. You simply click on it. I will role play for you. So I'm going to click on my emoticon, and you can see my hand raised next to my name. And when that happens, we can take note and call on you if you have a question or comment. So please be sure to use that aspect of Adobe Connect to keep the conversation rolling along. All right, I see 30 folks have signed up, 31. Thank you again for signing into this name piece. I'm going to get us started on our presentation and then move us on to the PowerPoint page in just another couple minutes. So, again, welcome to the webinar, Behind the Scenes with Strategic Planning. We decided to split this up into two pieces because we wanted to spend a little extra time really talking about some of the theories and methods of strategic planning and in this first webinar, and do a more practical presentation of the toolkit in the second webinar. Strategic planning is really a strategic plan is the result of intentional planning. Peter Drucker, a management thinker from the 50s and 60s, said the best way to predict your future is to create it. Well, that is another way of talking about the goal of strategic planning, to articulate the paths that will guide an organization or project towards its future. So meaningful strategic planning enables effective change, really, by considering what needs to happen, what actions are needed in order to achieve that organization's vision. I'm going to switch our template so you guys have something interesting to look at. In this webinar, we'll be describing how strategic planning allows for successful change, talking through the strategic planning cycle, and suggest tips for effective strategic planning and managing change. This presentation and discussion will support your work of developing a strategic plan for your recently funded network development grant project. A planning guide and a template to help you create the first grant deliverable is actually available for you to file down in the file download section or the file share section on the lower left hand of your Adobe Connect. That's for those of you that are really kind of eager to get started. We'll present the second part of our strategic planning webinar in October to walk through the guide and the template. In the file share, you'll also find a PDF of this presentation and a sample guide that presents some information from strategic plans that we've collected and talked through over the past few years. I'd like to introduce myself a little bit further for those that are not as familiar with who I am and our organization. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to pass the microphone to Deb so she can introduce herself as well. So as Director of Program Development here at the National Health Resource Center and Rural Health Innovations, I've been working with networks for the past few years in various components of technical assistance or providing education, and have spent good amount of time with network leaders, problem solving, ways of engaging their stakeholders, of moving their networks towards the vision and the goals that they're hoping to achieve during their grant. I've also had the opportunity of working with rural health organizations, hospitals and clinic leaders and administrators as they focus on their organizations and working to achieve their goals and their vision for their organization. I'm a certified facilitator, which gives me an opportunity to have a lot of knowledge and expertise around helping organizations think through and providing process for organizations to think through their planning efforts. And actually am also teaching in a rural health MBA program the class of organization development. So this topic of engaging stakeholders, of seeking to achieve what the project or the organization's really aiming for is something that gets me quite excited, and I could talk about it quite a bit. So what I'll be talking about in the first part of this webinar today is really a condensed version of the course that I teach for OD in my MBA program. So that's a little bit of what I bring to our webinar today and the strategic planning resources and tools that we have created for you. And Deb, how about you introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you, Cap. Good afternoon. My name is Deborah Lane, and I'm a program specialist on the Network TA team here at Rural Health Innovations. My natural bent is that of an educator and to empower those that I work with to accomplish their goals. And years ago, that led me to obtain a master's degree in education, especially in adult education. Most of my professional career has been spent working with networks and collaborations all around making change in the communities that they serve. Through the years, I've gained a lot of knowledge and experience in designing formal plans and in implementation of those plans. All of these efforts really have focused on changing the overall population wellness and the overall wellness of the community. My experience in facilitating planning events with networks like yours has been one of the most rewarding parts of my job in the last years here. It's such a delight to take a group of people who want to collaborate together with a germ of an idea and by day's end have a plan of how to make it a reality, which is strategic planning. I really look forward to working with all of you in these coming years through the course of your grant.
Thank you, Deb. Rural Health Innovations is your technical assistance provider for this Network Development Grant Program. It's RHI is a subsidiary of the National Rural Health Resource Center, and we really are very glad to be providing you with assistance and tools to make an impact on your individual communities, and specifically today to support your work as network leaders in the important effort of planning. So let's go ahead and get started. With our time together today, we are aiming for you to understand how strategic planning helps with implementing change by providing some behind-the-scenes theories and approaches for effective planning. And we hope that you are able to identify how to take advantage of the dynamic and iterative nature of the strategic planning cycle to progressively move towards your vision and explore effective strategic planning approaches and methods that rely on leadership and the energy of collaboration to step a network project into the future. We will present steps for effective planning that are meant to both affirm your current strategic planning practices and also give new insights and tools to use during the coming months of planning. Change is understood as something new or different than the way it was in the past. This image of mountain peaks is a metaphor. Each peak is an achievement of change. Your network development grant projects are seeking to create change, to reach for new mountain peaks over the course of this grant. And today we're talking about strategic planning for your projects. I'm suggesting that strategic planning is planning for change. I have a poll I'm hoping that you guys will participate in with me. And what I'm bringing it up, we're going to cover our pretty picture a little bit. This is a short answer poll for folks that are new to Adobe Connect. When you type your answer in, first please give their name and then what is one of your network development project goals or perhaps even your larger network vision. This is the highest level thinking of the projects and your organization. And if you type it in, type your answer here box and click on the icon to the far right of that typing box, then your answer will show up below along with everybody else's. And what's nice about the short answer poll, it's different than a chat box, is that you can edit your response. So go ahead if you would, type in some of those project goals that you have on your mind. It doesn't have to be exact, but some of the things that you're working on and aiming for, some of the things that are the top of the mountain, what you're trying to achieve. Thank you. I see increasing access to healthcare services, expanding access to behavioral health resources, increasing the number of telehealth services available in rural health areas, having a certified medical home, a pediatric medical home, developing long-term leadership sustainability within the network, expanding rural graduate medical education opportunities, integrated healthcare program among network partners, engaging the community, achieving full sustainability and payment from payers and increasing our CHW service area. Thank you guys for sharing these, and go ahead and keep typing if you're in the middle of that. But I am, oh, and by the way, another thing you all have control of is the scroll bar in the short answer box. You're able to control that, so you can scroll down and see what other folks are working on. Again, this will be part of the recorded webinar, and for right now, I'm using it to prompt your thinking at that highest level of our mountain peaks. So these are achievements that you all are seeking in your programs. They are the vision of your network or the vision of your project. So you'll hear me interchanging those words a bit, vision and goals, because we're thinking at a really high level, not at the strategic level, but at what we're trying to attain or achieve with our projects. I'm emphasizing this language because in the language of planned change, having the vision and the goal to aim for is a critical aspect of our work. And it will help you as leaders to approach the entire effort of your projects. In the next few slides, I'm going to share with you some approaches and theories of planned change that you can rely on as leaders to be successful in engaging with your stakeholders and managing the changes that your projects are working on to achieve. I can tell that this is going to be an exciting few years of working with you all as I continue to read through some of these goals. All right, I'm going to move our poll. Thank you again. I'd like to introduce to you the balanced scorecard methodology and approach to planning. Robert Kaplan and David Norton, both business and management thinkers in the 1980s, studied organizations to figure out why some succeed and others don't. They discovered that those succeeding had a holistic way of approaching planned change within their organizations. We have adapted their work for our strategic planning resources and have translated it a bit to make it easier for all of us to use. There is a lot of information and knowledge to glean from Kaplan and Norton's work and the balanced scorecard methodology. It's robust and it's sound. and we really commend their work to you. For today, I'm going to use a baseball game metaphor to define some of the planning terminology that we will be using in our discussion today and within the strategic planning guide and template. I'm going to walk through this pyramid of thinking. This is Kaplan and Norton help giving us a framework and a way of thinking through our planning. So mission. Mission can be understood as why we exist or what we do. In our baseball metaphor, we play baseball. That's our mission. Values describe what is important to us or how we do our work. And in our baseball game, we play fair and we play hard. For our vision, what do we want to be or what do we want to achieve? Our baseball team wants to win the biggest trophy in the league and be the envy of all the other baseball teams. Well, at this point, we really start digging into the framework. We develop our strategy, which is our game plan. This takes some effort. We need to understand our environment, understand our competition, our customers. We need to know what we're good at and what we're not so good at. Our game plan, our strategies for a baseball team may be something like selling a mix of affordable and expensive tickets for our games, having an amazing venue for our customers, being excellent players of the game and perfect tacticians, or having a positive team environment that is supportive and having the tools that our players need to be really great. So the game plan starts to be more specific in their actions that move us towards our vision of winning the trophy. But we're not done there when it comes to thinking holistically and systemically about our mission and our vision. If we really want to win the biggest trophy in the league, the entire team needs to know that's our vision. And they need to know and understand our strategies so that everyone can contribute and pull in the same direction. This takes focused and intentional communication to translate the strategy to all of the stakeholders. Stakeholders include both the internal staff and team members on our team and also the external stakeholders, the customers, the funders, the vendors. Operationalizing strategy is the next step. It means identifying initiatives and actions that are aligned with the strategies. This creates opportunity for everyone to be empowered to make decisions because the initiatives and actions are all heading toward the larger agreed upon goal and vision. For our baseball team, this means that they are practicing plays, that vendor contracts make sense, that customer outreach is effective. And next, the entire team needs to understand and measure what they want to improve. This means monitoring key measures and using the information to make adaptations and to be agile. For example, key measures for a baseball team that is aiming for the trophy includes more than baseball player stats. Other measures might be ticket sales in numbers and dollars, customer enthusiasm, the number of fans that show up in bad weather, the number of fans that show up at away games. Some of those baseball stats are also important to keep track of, but we also want to understand players' attitudes and the outlooks the players have and the team members have for the future of the game. Now, if we think through all of that, now we're starting to think systemically and holistically, and this is what Kaplan and Norton give to us. This idea that it takes more than just the strategies to be successful with plan change. I have another management thinker to introduce to you, and that's Peter Senge. He's also a thinker from the 80s and 90s and the author of the organizational development book, The Fifth Discipline. And he views organizations as dynamic systems in a state of continuous adaptation and improvement. This identifies that having a shared vision actually pulls an organization toward the vision where the ongoing operations or the current state are guided by the strategic objectives and therefore are constantly adjusting and working to realize the achievements identified by the vision. So in other words, we work every day in our operations, but we're guided by the strategic path that moves us towards the vision. And when we all have our eye on the vision, that informs our decisions and our thinking and literally pulls us towards the future. Senge is saying that our projects live within a dynamic environment that requires an iterative approach of planning, communicating, operationalizing, and adapting, a cycle, and that the key to making progress forward is to have a destination to aim for, a beacon that is the shared vision of the organization's achievements and aspirations. The takeaway really is that when we're seeking to achieve plan change, when we are engaged in strategic planning, a commitment to a shared vision really is the critical first step. Because vision identifies the achievements of the network's aspirations and acts as a beacon, and our baseball team, the shared vision to win the biggest trophy, pulls the entire team forward toward that vision. So for you guys, when considering your projects, the vision may be your network organization vision, or as I've stated earlier, perhaps it's your project goals, ones that you've already identified. We had that amazing list of goals earlier. Whatever your goals are, it's providing a beacon for your work. The real key here is that everyone, all of your project stakeholders, are aiming for the same thing. This requires intentional collaboration and an effort to gain commitment to the project goals. Within the Strategic Planning Guide, we have provided several facilitated conversations. One of them will help you have a check-in in your grant project goals with your stakeholders. We encourage you to be intentional about having this vision check-in conversation. So what is the strategic planning cycle that is both dynamic and iterative? This cycle is actually a different way of saying the Kaplan and Norton balanced scorecard approach to successful organizations. If we illustrate with our baseball metaphor, given that a team has done the initial work of identifying its mission, what we do is play baseball, and how we do our work, which is for a baseball team, playing fair and playing hard, and the team has established a shared vision, so they're all aiming for the same achievement of winning the biggest trophy, then we jump into this cycle at the analyze and plan phase, the part of the cycle where strategies are developed. For our baseball team, this is the time to study our competition and make a game plan. We're going to walk through the strategic planning cycle. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking in more detail about ways to approach the analyze and plan phase, since this is the immediate next step of your strategic planning effort. And then Deb will be talking us through the other parts of the cycle. I like to think of the strategic planning cycle in terms of a slinky. A slinky is circular, but if you follow one of the coils around, you exit at a different point than you begin. So it is with a network or a project as you move your project toward its goals. And this is really what Senge was talking about, where every day we're at a new point that is further along. But when you come back around through the communicate and operationalizing and monitoring and adapting, back to the analyzing and planning, the project isn't in the same place it started, but has moved to a new environment, someplace different. Our strategic planning suggestion, in knowing that the strategic planning cycle is both dynamic and iterative, is that it's important to schedule routine engagement with the cycle. For example, schedule quarterly monitoring of progress and an annual review of the environment and the strategic paths you've selected. It may be that adjustments need to be made as you cycle through your plan change. It will definitely support your efforts of engaging your stakeholders, as they will also be routinely reminded of the vision of the project, be encouraged with the successes, and be involved with the creativity of making adjustments. This engagement with the strategic planning cycle will keep your slinky stepping forward towards your project goals and network vision, as Senge's thinking is telling us. This picture comes with a story. Many folks came to our country looking for work, And some of them came to places where there's an abundance of timber, and they became lumberjacks. The object of this work was to cut down the trees and get them to a river where the logs could float downstream to the mill. Normally, things went along smoothly, but occasionally a log jam developed. What a mess. This is the point at which it was easy to distinguish the seasoned and wise lumberjacks from the rookies. The rookies would become aware of the problem and run down to the river. They'd begin pulling out logs hoping to clear the jam. It was really difficult and very dangerous work. The seasoned lumberjacks, on the other hand, would become aware of the problem, the log jam, and they'd immediately climb a tree. From this vantage point, they could pinpoint which log was causing the jam. They'd climb down and remove the specific one or two logs that were holding up the process, and the flow was restored. So when you have a complex problem to solve, a log jam to clear, jump into the planning at the analyzing the situation stage. For the lumberjacks, this meant climbing in a tree to gather information from the situation, to study the issues, to analyze the data. For network leaders, taking time to study the environment and analyze the situation is particularly relevant at the start of your project as you are shifting into gear from the grant application to actually getting started. There are a lot of methods for collecting and analyzing the environmental data. You've probably heard of the SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, threat approach. There's also a force field analysis method. We encourage you to take time with your stakeholders to do this work and to study the environment that is impacting your project with your goals in mind. This time of study will identify those things that are helping your project and those things that may get in your way. We refer to these as levers and blocks, and it is this knowledge that helps you avoid the predicament our friend in this slide will discover soon. Theories and practices that support successful change and transition tell us that thinking systemically and taking the time to analyze the environment while aiming for a vision will decrease the likelihood of getting crushed by unforeseen risks, and also gives us information we need to chart a path, that is, develop strategies that will get us to our vision. With the results from the environmental scan, your work as network leaders is to help your stakeholders find the paths that will leverage the strengths of the project and address the blocks in specifically achieving the agreed upon project goals or network vision. This is difficult strategic thinking work, and it is best done with a group of stakeholders that are engaged in and want to achieve the goals. Recall that strategic planning is about intentionally addressing the challenges of the environment with the intention of achieving the vision. Of course, doing the work of the work plan or executing the actions that operationalize the strategies is absolutely critical, but the activities described in the work plan take place after the work of discerning the paths or the strategies. The project will follow and be guided by as it moves towards its vision. This really is important to differentiate since many of your stakeholders will want to get started on the work. I have found that healthcare folks really are doers more often than planners. But what Kaplan and Norton and Senge are telling us is that for plan change to be effective, the organization and the project and the team and the stakeholders all need to be pulling together. And to do this, they need to be on the same path. The path is described by the strategies. Our suggestion is to use a participative process for building consensus among stakeholders and identifying meaningful strategic objectives. You may already be confident that you've done this work. If so, our encouragement is to still spend some time with your stakeholders reviewing and talking about the project strategies so that everyone is comfortable and aware of the common paths for achieving the project goals, and that the execution of the work plan can be intentionally aligned, carefully so, and therefore headed for the agreed upon vision. If, however, you are thinking that your stakeholders may not be engaged at this point and may not be aware of the project goals and strategies as described in your grant application, then this fall is a time for you to spend with your stakeholders to work through the synthesis work of discerning strategic paths. Our strategic planning guide provides some facilitated conversations for either of these paths, and it's something for you to think about. The sideways benefit of the strategic level conversation is that it furthers relationships within and between your stakeholders. It builds trust and understanding among your network partners, all of which is critical for effective plan change. We would commend to you our RHI resources on collaboration to support this important collaboration work. You can find our collaboration resources on our website, and feel free to give any of us a call or email with your questions or thoughts. One other suggestion we have related to your project's governance and as a way to contribute to trust building is to finalize or approve the project strategies by the network's governing body. This will increase confidence and trust between your stakeholders as well. I've been talking through the theories and methods of successful plan change related specifically to your project's overall goals and jumping into the strategic planning cycle with analyzing and planning. We're going to continue walking through the strategic planning cycle, and I'm going to pass this presentation over to Deb to take it from here.
Thank you, Cap. Yes, Cap has been talking through the first three of the four elements in the analyze and plan phase. So those first three are your network's purpose and vision, your goals, taking a good hard look at your environment and analyzing the elements that you're seeing, and finally coming up with some of those strategic paths. And the fourth piece or fourth element that we look at in analyze and plan is the evaluation measures and plan to adjust and to monitor, which is your evaluation plan, which will be the next deliverable after the strategic plan in your cycle for your grant here. But we're going to take and move around the strategic planning cycle now, and we're going to move to document and communicate. The details of how to communicate those components of your strategic plan throughout your network, throughout all of your partner organizations. So when we talk about communicating, we are talking about getting those details of your strategic plan out to members of your network and the other partners that you work with. But there needs to be intentional communication through the entire strategic planning cycle. So there needs to be a plan for communicating of your evaluation measures and your results and the initiatives that you're implementing and how you're going to be adjusting. So communication really flows into every single one of those pieces, truly, of the strategic planning cycle. And again, it's really a plan for intentionally and purposefully communicating those strategic objectives that have been approved, the environment, and the progress of your project to your partners and your other stakeholders as well. We want to communicate our network's efforts because it encourages commitment by our members for the efforts that we're doing. Communication is really the key in building commitment and accountability in achieving the strategic objectives. And when I think about a communication plan, I think about some major elements. First of all is what key information are you going to communicate? Second, to know the audience specifically to be addressed by a certain communication. Is it your program staff, board members, members of other organizations that work with you, their staff, potential partners, funders, community members? And then there's the how. Are you going to deliver the information? Are you going to do it in person at a network board meeting, email, website, SharePoint, a phone call, formal reports, discussion, planning retreats? Are you going to use social media? And then when will you provide that information? Ad hoc, monthly, quarterly, in person, only as requested? And finally, who is responsible for the communication, for its accuracy, timeliness, and frequency. Here's a sample of a template that could be used to develop a communication plan. This is what you're going to be finding as an example in your strategic plan toolkit. And you'll note here it's very simply, it's the what, the audience, the how, the when, and the who. A communication plan doesn't need to be a lengthy document, but rather one that will help you and your staff keep on track. The communication plan, this who, what, when, is only a part of that communicating and documenting. So we have to visually or somehow have a document generally to show people what we're communicating. And here's an example of a strategy map from the balanced scorecard methodology, which can be used to communicate strategies to your members and partners. And here's a sample of a dashboard to show progress toward your goals. And this is most commonly developed in an evaluation plan. The next piece that we're moving into in that strategic planning cycle is the execute and plan phase. This section shows the alignment of your strategic objectives, outcomes, and key initiatives. Key initiatives that operationalize the strategic objectives are generally 6 to 18-month actions or projects. This isn't to be confused with your network's work plan. The work plan is a project management tool for activities related to your identified key initiatives. But operationalizing your objectives takes a higher look than your work, or a higher level look than your work plan. But your work plan definitely informs this work. Intentionally identifying both strategic objectives and key initiatives during this planning process is important. And this will often take two steps. Often when the key initiatives are identified, when we're doing strategic objectives to get to those main objectives, there's a lot of potential things that we can look at as key initiatives. But then really taking the time once we've decided what those strategic objectives are and diving into it and figuring out exactly how to operationalize those objectives by identifying those major key initiatives. And this is often best illustrated by some visual to help you think at this level to your program objectives from the strategic plan and then the measures that will be developed in your evaluation plan. You'll be addressing your key initiatives to accomplish those different objectives and measures. And when all of these are in alignment, they work together in harmony, creating a winning situation where your goals inform your strategies and measures, which in turn inform your initiatives. Here's an example of diagramming this harmony. You'll see the goals with the objectives, the measurements of the strategy, and finally the aligned activities. We're going to be talking in a moment about choosing a framework, traditional or logic model. And when it starts to come to this kind of diagramming, that's when we see those choices in methodology or approaching come into play. Finally, the last of the four elements of that strategic planning cycle, we're working our way around that slinky, is the monitoring and adapt. And you're executing your plan, and how effective is your plan. This describes how the progress of the strategic objectives will be monitored and adjusted to keep in aim to your shared vision. Strategic objectives must be monitored and reviewed over time to determine their effectiveness. Program evaluation systematically collects information to monitor progress and to report and communicate the results to your network members, partners, and stakeholders, and to your greater community. There's that communication word again. And again, that communication piece flows through all of the plans and really that entire strategic planning cycle. You're measuring your strategies, not your initiatives, when you're thinking at this level of project management. Monitoring progress is really the first step in this process. And in your evaluation plan, your network will identify the measures of success, the data collection modes, and how you'll collect and report. It is recommended that you monitor the progress toward your goals quarterly, and at least annually take that second step to really look at starting to make adjustments to your strategic directions and determine new initiatives that may be indicated by your quarterly monitoring. Here's a sample of what this plan and monitor and adapt could look like. Again, your overarching goal, the objectives, and for each objective is a description of the measures, your target, its definition, along with the methods of collecting the data. And the plan also includes the frequency to collect the data, along with who's responsible to collect the data. We've just talked you through the multiple plans, really, that make up the strategic planning cycle. The basics include the strategic plan, a communication plan, an operational plan, which is your work plan, and an evaluation plan. In October, we will be talking you through the guide and the template for your strategic plans. And remember that your strategic plan is due December 31st, 2017. And then later this year, we'll be giving you a guide and template that will support your evaluation plan. We would like to take and offer you some tips when you're starting to think about doing your strategic planning. The National Rural Health Resource Center and Rural Health Innovations have developed resources describing the importance of collaboration in transforming healthcare. And Kat mentioned some of those resources previously. And during this time of rapid change within healthcare and the movement toward population health, rural networks have a unique and critical opportunity to bring stakeholders together from both healthcare-based as well as community-based organizations. We like to use this illustration, and perhaps many of you have seen this one before, but we can all struggle to get through our own maze and get to that same end, or we can meet together and figure out how we can help each other get there. And so the list of stakeholders invited to participate in a strategic planning process will vary depending upon your network's unique characteristics. Consider very carefully the stakeholders that bring information and understanding of the environment, and that can help you strategically consider the changes to move from your current reality toward what your vision is or what your goal is. Consider including stakeholder organizations such as hospitals, clinics, long-term care, home care, dental care, behavioral health, schools, tribes, community social services, public health, economic development, and the list goes on. To bring all of these stakeholders together, it takes time. It takes a few months. And we have a poll question up asking, how much thought have you started to put into it? Because of the number of people, have you started to put a date on the calendar? Have you started to talk with your board members and your other partners? And when you look at the strategic plan toolkit, you'll find a sample of agendas. There's one full day of strategic planning, and then there's another agenda for 5 1 to 2 hour sessions or 1 to 2 hour meetings. And so we really, really urge you at this point to start looking at when am I going to pull my stakeholders together in order to have an effective strategic planning event. Know your audience. A strategic plan serves a purpose for both internal and external audiences. The internal readers will use the strategic plan as a reference for decision-making and as a guide or roadmap, if you will, for meeting challenging changes. The external reader will use the strategic plan to gain a better understanding of your organization's focus, direction, and strategies in order to make decisions on funding or membership. One of the insights we had early on, and one that you will see the results of through our time together here, it's really important to use tried and true ideas and tools from other industries to help healthcare collaborations such as yours succeed and sustain themselves. And so you're going to be finding us incorporating tools used in business as part of their marketing thinking in the work that we do with you in our various toolkits and plans. Another insight is when you're writing these plans, especially your strategic plan, don't write like a grant. Get rid of the fluff. I have a small flock of sheep, and annually we get rid of the fluff. And we take them from their full fall winter coat to their sleek summer attire. And you've received the dollars to do your good work. And these documents need to tell both the internal and the external reader how you are executing your grant application. The templates that we'll be providing you will help you do it in a really simple way. So don't labor over all of the fluff. Just keep things sleek and trim. Your grant deliverables are not meant to be documents that go on the shelf once they're uploaded into EHB. They're dynamic, and they're meant to be used and revised. A very common comment from the last cohort of development grantees has been how useful these plans have been and how they built off of each other and how they truly make their work and the network more successful. Part of your evaluation plan will be a plan to monitor and adapt. But just be thinking ahead, and I can't emphasize enough to put yourself on at least a quarterly schedule for monitoring progress toward goals so you can make the needed adjustments. And plan a time annually to go back to that analyze and plan phase. Remember the slinky. As you're coming around to that monitoring and adapting, you're ready to go into a new coil, and you should be doing that at least annually. There are two planning frameworks commonly used in the planning process, the traditional strategic plan and the logic model. Both approaches involve the same components and conversations, but the descriptive language and terms will vary. The framework selection is really based on your preference as network leaders. Whichever planning framework you select, just be consistent with the language throughout the planning and documentation process. The guide will include language based on the traditional strategic model framework. As mentioned in the introduction webinar, we will be providing you with toolkits for each of your deliverables. The toolkits contain 3 elements: a guide, template, and samples. We will have a webinar on October 7th where we'll walk you through the strategic plan guide and strategic plan template. However, if you are eager and want to get started, we provided those tools in the download pod over at the left for today, as Cab has mentioned. And then later this year, you'll be receiving the toolkit for the evaluation plan. And with that, Cap, I'm turning it back to you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Deb. I have some time for us to have a little bit of discussion or sharing some of our thoughts. There are a lot of folks on the phone today that I'm familiar with and know that they have been doing strategic planning over the past years in their networks and with their projects. I'm wondering if David had a good question about October 7th being a Saturday. So I'm sure someone on my team can correct that date for us in the chat box. I'm wondering if I can get a few folks to kind of just comment. So if anyone wants to just jump in, otherwise I might call a couple names since we have a few minutes here. The question, sorry about that, the question is, how have you all seen the importance of having that vision, that common shared understanding of what the goal is? How have you seen that play out as being important in your planning in the past work that you've done as strategic planners in helping your network move forward? Anyone willing to share how they have seen that be an important part? You know, I've emphasized it as being really a really super critical first thing to do is get everybody on the same page. Anyone that would share about that experience? You can either raise your hand or you can jump in. *2 to unmute your phones.
Hey, Cap, this is Andrew. Can you hear me?
I sure can, Andrew. And guess what? I was just about to call your name. Came to the top of my list.
Well, I'm glad I was at the top of the list. But I guess one thing for us, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said doing this up front is so important, because as we've seen with some of the different projects that we've launched, if all of our stakeholders and partners and members aren't on board, it's easy to kind of get the scope creep, and people want to start bringing in some other projects, other program, maybe even some other bias. But if we can keep everyone on track from the beginning and having a clear plan, a clear vision for the project, I've seen a much greater implementation and probably a lot better buy-in. I think it seems to be a lot easier.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm just going to find a slide that shows my Peter Senge look here. David Mortimer, thank you for raising your hand. Please jump on in. *2 to unmute. You were also on the top of my list to give a call.
Thank you so much. With our Illinois Telehealth Network, we had a network planning grant that allowed us to do some planning with strategy and identifying first with 16 different stakeholders what exactly the network mission and vision was, and that was conducted about the same time as a needs assessment, the very first needs assessment, because we had a diverse collection of very rural, very small town and a couple of urban stakeholders from quite a variety of hospitals and healthcare physician groups. We kind of through that process started having a shared understanding, a shared goal, and then eventually a focus that led us through the strategic planning process, and just having that vision statement, that mission statement, and then we were on our way. It was just so exciting to be able to focus on something and avoid that, that kind of mission creep.
Awesome. Thank you, David. Also, well said. Caslin, thank you for raising your hand. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Thanks, Cap. This is ancillary. I think that everything that everybody's shared already is really key. A side perk that we've had is that our members really value the process. They've felt like it was enriching for them, and it's one of the benefits that we like to give them is going through this and something that they can use in their own organizations.
That's great. Yeah, so you're actually, in a way, role modeling really good strategic thinking so that your members get better at it as well. Great. Thanks, Caslin. And then the another question I think we were getting at, both Deb and I, is some of the importance of using process. I think this Caslin triggered my thinking on this, and you know, I have a kind of a bias of the importance of use of a facilitator. So sometimes you as network leaders might be great facilitators, but having an outside person come in to help with the process and the discussion where you get to join into the strategic thinking as well. Anyone out there has had an experience that they've used a facilitator and that has worked out for them, that has helped them in some way with their planning effort? Anyone share their external facilitator experience, or maybe the idea that they took on the facilitation themselves and it really worked out just fine, and any tips for that as we're thinking about our strategic planning?
Hi, Cap. This is Laura.
Hi, Laura. Nice to hear your voice.
So we, as at the end on year 2, we were able to have a site visit in our first grant. This is our second grant. And so Deb came out and facilitated the process, and it did really help so that I was able to participate and sit back. It really helped us kind of get focused, as you know, we had spent kind of so much of the beginning of the grant focused on the details of some of the work plan objectives that it did help to then kind of sit back and get that broader picture again, and where are we going and are we on the right track, and so that we had a game plan for, you know, post-grant, right? Like that it really is a bigger vision and a bigger process, and helped keep us in track and kind of realign us to make sure we knew where we were going.
Facilitate. Thank you for sharing that, Laura. And part of our guide does include several different facilitated conversations. So you can either use them yourselves if you are wanting to facilitate at least portions of your strategic planning effort, or maybe use them with a facilitator in talking through what you are hoping to achieve with your strategic planning, and really aiming for it to be very participative and open, where there's creativity and engagement with those network partners and your stakeholders. So with just another minute to go, I'm going to switch us over to our last image for our Adobe Connect page. For those of you that are new to our RHI Technical Assistance, we like to bring up this last page and gather your insights. We have one of our underlying values is continuous performance improvement, so we are aiming for getting better all the time. So we also have the 3 boxes at the top about the relevance and the increasing your knowledge about strategic planning. In the middle, there's a short answer for gathering your ideas on suggested topics for webinars. So if anything during today triggered a thought that, gee, I wish I knew more about this, please let us know. We'll incorporate that into our planning and thinking for the year that's coming up. We also have in the middle of our page some upcoming TA. So we have a network summit coming up. About 17 network organizations are going to be joining us in Minneapolis on September 14th and 15th. A report will be coming out of that event, and you'll be hearing more about the role of networks in the changing healthcare landscape. In the middle of September, and actually pretty soon, you'll be receiving calendar invites for us to do some one-on-one conversations with you. We call them TA check-in calls, and we're really looking forward to getting to know you and having a chance for some conversations. And then in October, on the 5th, I believe, we have a